Today's interview is a special bonus episode to address a heavy but vital topic that I consider a crucial conversation that we need to have in construction today. And this is today, tomorrow, and forever. For the foreseeable future, this needs to be something at the forefront of our minds. And this is something that's affected me recently on a project that I'm working on right now. And the topic is mental health, and specifically suicide in the construction industry. What we're going to talk about today with my special guests is inspired by the story of Alberto, a worker who tragically took his life. We'll explore the immense pressures that construction workers face, and this includes even beyond just construction workers with tools. These are people in the design, even people in the offices. This is not something that's unique to the project site. This happens outside the fence as well as inside the fence, as my friends say. We're going to look at the urgent need for the full, going beyond mental health awareness, the full gambit of the personal experience. My amazing guests today are going to share their insights and how we can take action so that we can support the right environment and help individuals and teams to prevent these types of tragedies from happening ever again. This conversation is crucial to fostering a safer, more compassionate workplace for everyone. Viewers, be advised. This is going to be a very sensitive topic. Welcome to the show, Brian Winningham and Thomas LaMay. Very happy to have both of you on. Yeah, thank you for taking the time. Super appreciate you taking time out of your day to have this conversation. And I am in awe at the work that you two have put into this and into this space. And I know that this has affected both of you in different ways. So I want to just open it up right away. Brian, if you can just tell people some background of your military and construction experience, that would be awesome, just to set the stage of like, who is Brian?
Yeah, so I started in construction when I was 10 years old, working at a local lumber company in my hometown where my dad was the manager. And I like to say I took a 4-year break from construction to be in the Army, where I was an Army Ranger at 3rd to 75th Ranger Battalion. And I had some great experiences there and got out and went to school for a little while, and then came back in and started working in the office, and began work first with a mechanical contractor. And from there, I went to work for a fire and water restoration contractor out on the West Coast. And then I went to work for a company called PCL Construction out there, and I worked for them for about 7 years. I was one of the first new hires after they had completed what was then called Staples Center, what's now, I guess, Crypto.com Arena. But yeah, so that was sort of my introduction to some of the larger contractors and working with them. From there, I went to work for Skanska. I moved to Texas, worked for Turner Construction here in Texas for a little while, and then went back to work for Skanska for a while. And then about 6 years ago now, almost 6 years ago, I sort of had an epiphany that I wanted to really help folks have better experiences on their projects. And from there, I formed my own company and began consulting. So that's been my life for the last few years.
Yeah, thank you. And with Brian, he didn't mention that I've been on many calls since he went independent with us. So we started really bumping into each other a lot more. And I got to tell you all that Brian is one of the best facilitators in the space, both in person and virtual, hybrid, whatever flavor, he can do it. So
I'm not good at hybrid. I'll tell you that right now. I'll admit that I have not figured out a way to do hybrid facilitation at all. So I give many kudos to anybody that's got that one figured out, because that one I can't do, Felipe. So thank you for the kind words. But I'll admit what I can't do too.
Asterisk that it's just all virtual, all in person. No, and we'll just say, like, can we just assume that, Brian, on your dinner plate, you don't let your food mix either?
Not too much, no.
Not so. All right.
Not too much.
Brian. Thomas, how about yourself?
Thomas LaMay. I currently work at DPR Construction. Felipe, me and you go way back. Probably me and you go way back longer than you probably even know. I've been following your work for a long time. in person in the Bay Area. But geez, where do I start? When I was in preschool, they were doing a renovation on the preschool. This was in the 80s. So doing active renovations while children are in session, that was okay. But but I think they were pouring a slab and they're finishing it off in a newspaper article. And this was in Western Nebraska in the 80s. So this would have been newsworthy. But they got a picture of me watching them work. And this is, I don't know, 3 years old, maybe 4. And I'm like on it, intently working on it. And I've always known that I've been interested in being a builder. And recently, I said this before, I gotta have to say this again, because you know the movie Goodfellas? You know how it starts out, the Hank Hill scene, he's standing behind the car and he slams the hood. It's like, my whole life I wanted to be a gangster. It's a Ray Liotta guy. But my whole life I wanted to be a builder. So, and my family had always supported that. So basically in my family, if you're the firstborn male, you go into the service. That's just the way it is. Probably all the way back into a lot way back. Like this is probably a lot of more. So some of, and I'm coming from a German family. So if you trace back into it, some of those family members are enemy combatants to the United States. Like we have, we have that in our side of the family, but it's that mentality that you always give service. So, and it's always that you never quit. You have this mentality that you either do this and then you go into building. So, but my family was like, well, Thomas, you're like a little different. So I'm like making this story really long, but I'm like, I always really wanted to get into it. So I went to college in Nebraska, got an engineering degree, and then immediately moved to California and got into the general contracting side. And my path got me up into the Bay Area, maybe 10 years later, where I was a project superintendent and had some kind of influence and positional influence. And I got wound up, and what I mean by that is wound up into this lean environment where I started meeting people like Felipe. I'm pointing up, you might not be up on your screen. But I started meeting people like we were just talking about, like Paz Arroyo and Professor Tomlin and those type of people. And it changed my life. And I'm not even saying that in a small way. It like rearranged the direction of where I was going. So a lot of what we're going to say today can save your life. And it doesn't have to be a big deal. But I would say I went from being a kind of middle of the road superintendent, like I was doing fine, and I'm like really intense, and I'm very passionate about work, but it changed the trajectory of my career, my earnings, everything. And now I'm like senior leader on a mega project, and doing very well and being very like happy about it. And now I work for DPR Construction, who now encourages me in a big way to do the stuff that we're talking about here. So I'm really happy to do that. So that's a long story, but I wanted to tell people that story.
Yeah, that's great.
And you're in it, Felipe, and so are you, Brian.
Well, yeah,
we all worked at the same company for a while, Turner, right?
All three of us worked at Turner at one point.
Yeah, I think that there's probably, you could probably, the list would be long of all the people that have worked for Turner at one point or another, right? I mean, very
place to
long.
work. Talk about a learning experience, like getting a master's
and an even
degree.
better place for me anyway to have worked at. So, right. But no, we always talk, and we talk way too much about, the cost of projects. And I started looking at it different a few years ago, and it's just thinking about the lives you've impacted. I built schools and data centers, and data centers for hospitals, and just tens of thousands of lives impact. And it's just when you start thinking about it that way, what we do is sacred. I mean, there's something very, very special about construction. Very, very special. And it's just, it's such an honor to be able to have done it, to just be in this industry.
Yeah, totally agree. And, thank you, both of you, for giving your background. I think it's super important for us to all connect, and we'll talk about things. I'll be sure, and the audience keep me accountable. If we mention something or links, I'll have it all in the show description below. Thomas also has been on the show before. This is Brian's first time. So Thomas and I, we welcome him as EBFC Show alumni. Welcome Brian to the family. First of many times, I'm sure, Brian, because he's got a good setup too, Thomas. Don't you agree?
So that basket will end up on my front porch this afternoon, right? That welcome basket, the alumni basket.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, that's
Still waiting for that one.
yeah. Maybe I'll send you a hat. I don't know.
I love hats.
Yeah, I know Brian.
You know that about me, right? I love hats.
There it is. He's got, for those of you listening to the show, audio only, I suggest you come back to the YouTube video and look at this giant, I can't even call this a hat. What would you call that, Thomas? So what he's got on his head?
The mascot head.
Mascot.
Bald eagle.
Bald eagle with the American flag bow tie, no less.
That's a story for another time, but
I've seen that hat a few times. I'm glad it made it to the show. Thank you for Brian for having that in arm's reach. So I'm going to come back to the more somber topic. So the two of you published an article together on Brian's blog post, Ranger Winnie. Let me get the right thing here, rangerwinnie.com. We'll put a direct link so people don't have to search for it. And it's the story of Alberto's suicide. It's a very emotional and personal, and it's quite long. I know that the blog post gives a reading time estimate, and I took much more than what it estimated. I want to just start by the easy question. What inspired the two of you to share this narrative?
So
go ahead.
Go ahead. You start this one. You start this one. I want you to.
I think I'm responsible for it because, but there are many good authors, books, publications, content out there. The one behind you, Construction Scrum, is a great example of that. Lean Builder, another great example of the publications that are out there. What we are, and I inspired Brian to join me. We want to write a book, and we're well into it now. This is the first chapter of that. So we released it early, and the reason why we released it early is it was in conjunction with Suicide Prevention Week in construction. So Construction Suicide Prevention Week. And then it's also Suicide Awareness Month in the United States. So it was very timely. And the subject matter, it was like this, we have to get this out, because this is, when I read this, I read it many times. I read it while we were writing it. And finally the time, once we got it put together, I freaking wept. So if you haven't read this, put yourself in a safe place. There's no audio version, so you can't listen to it, but it is about a suicide, and it's about construction workers, and it's about working in the construction workers. But what I mean by that is it's not about the office or doing process improvement on a big scale. What we're trying to go at is people who lead groups of 5 to 7 people who might not even consider themselves a leader. They might not even have the foreman label on them. They might be if you're in the union, you might be a journeyman. You might be a lead person if you're non-union.
Crew leader.
Yeah, like a group leader, or just in a crew, but you're just kind of you stand out and you kind of get people organized. And it's people who actually at the face of work who are really targeting that. And we use their words. So the words that we use and the subject matter we use, we try to craft it in the words that people use. So there's swear words in there. Oh yes. And we talk about using tools and ladders and all of the things, and there's complaints and there's conflict along the way. But we wanted to really dive into that because there's really not any in construction kind of literature about that. And there's a kind of a huge groundswell, like Felipe, you're part of this, and many others are. We're in the golden age of a lot of new thinking in the industry, and we stand on the shoulders of many great people who came before us, and now it's like now we're the frontline people in our generation who are like grew up with them, very academic leaders, but now we're like, okay, let's take action on this. So what we wanted to do is bring these theory of constraints, system thinking, all these things together, bring it into language that's not dumbed down. It's just in people's words that they use, but it's used in a way where they actually could read a story and then immediately go use it. So what I mean by that is I was like, I found Ranger Winnie, and I found him just like I found Felipe through their work, but their public work, and it's an admiring and rangerwinnie.com. And Brian here, he's a warrior poet. And that's a very, if you're an Army guy, that's a very like respected thing to be. And because you take the words and the trauma which you experienced, and there's some heavy stuff in there. Your time in Panama, oh my God, like I was tucked in bed 8 years old, and you're and they're jumping out of an airplane, and because you did that, I was able to do my thing. So I thank you for that. But I was like, I finally gotta get connected, and we finally gotta meet you. And then finally, I think we connected. I was like working in Texas, and we finally got to meet in person. And I was like, okay, now I got it. So Felipe, we were in New Orleans at like a lean Congress a couple of years ago, I think. And I finally like got up the courage, and I was like, Brian, what do you know about small unit leadership, small unit tactics, and what do you know about these like? And I like, what did I? It's like a Amazon thing. It was like string and magnets and little trinkets, and you were like, that's a sand table that you use in Ranger School. And I was like, you could use this kind of stuff for like building a logistics plan, like on the top of your scissor lift. So I'm like, but I was being crafty about it because I knew who better an expert than somebody who was not only in the Ranger Regiment, but went through a lot of the like Ranger School would be one, many others, Jump Master. So like a lot of the cool guy schools, but a lot of these schools where it's like ingrained in you, highly trained, and it's like you're traumatized into a lot of this stuff. But you're trained at the greatest, most highest level, and it's some of the best training that there ever is. And then also you went out and executed it in your active duty and in combat. And so I knew, I was like, this guy's an expert in this topic. So I was like trying to pull his heartstrings, and thank goodness he did. So I wanted to say that, and to say my gratitude and say thank you. But what it did was I'm obsessed with all things visual and working with like these small units in construction, but I needed an expert who can talk about communication and moving information and using signaling, that kind of stuff. So I connected here up with Brian, and it took off from ever since. So I'll let you maybe continue to reflect, Brian.
Yeah. So for both of us, it's been really critical that we don't just tell a story, but we provide things that folks can use. We want there to be tools in there and things that people can take away immediately to have. We have this thing in the Army that, when you're out patrolling or whatever, if you run into the enemy or signs the enemy, you send back what's called a salute report. We run into the enemy all the time on our projects, these problems that we run into on projects. And does the foreman have a good way of reporting that back, both to his company, to the other trades, and to the general contractor? Maybe the general contractor's provided something, maybe they haven't. There's about 8 million construction workers in the US. There's 900,000 construction companies. So that means that each one of those construction companies on average is, for every 10,000, person company like Turner, there's a whole lot of 5-person companies out there, little small companies. Do they have these resources? And we want all these folks to have the resources, because all of us getting better means all of us being better, and that's really what we want. We just really saw a need there at that level, and something that really hasn't been addressed a whole lot. I mean, I know that they get a lot of stuff, especially in union shops and stuff, but I mean, that can be varying too. A lot of that, I've seen a lot of apprentices come back going, God, I wish they'd stop. Those classes are so boring, and they don't have to be, and sometimes they're not.
And that's why this subject right out of the gate with mental illness and suicide is so important to start it off, because no one talks about it. No one does. This is so hidden. We might talk about this for a week in construction, and that is so awesome, because 2 years ago, there wasn't even there was no place for it. So what we're doing now is amazing, but we wanted to even start this book with immediate tools for people to take away about themselves and their small units, the people who you work around, and to recognize signs of suicidal behavior right out of the gate.
Kudos to Bolt, the company, one of the other companies that you're affiliated with there, Felipe. They've been at this longer than 2 years. They saw this need before I think some other companies did, and I'm really really appreciative of the industry partners that are doing the right things, and y'all have a really neat program there as well, as I understand it. So kudos.
We have what's called a gatekeepers program, where we are actually trained to positively intervene, not just get somebody on a phone with a counselor, but we get tools and training to intervene. And then there are things that you have to do to maintain that credential, to keep learning and keep your skill set up. And we have like an internal support group of those gatekeepers. I've been a gatekeeper for 2 years. I've got to do some more training to renew my credential and re-up again. So that's going to happen. I told Renee Wolf, who's been on my podcast as well, talked about the program. I'll put links into that podcast as well, so people can check that out. And there's more information on that gatekeeper program. And she has said on the show, and any company that wants to start a gatekeeper program, you can reach out to Renee and she can help you get started. So it's something that, again, this is going to be the theme of today's show, is like, take action, take action, take action. It's not theoretical.
And that's why this year that I became a mental health first aid instructor. I mean, it's critical, and I'm really excited to be doing that in person, not hybrid, but in person, here at my local AGC at the end of next month. So that's going to be really cool. So, and I'll start having some virtual offerings for that as well. People are interested later. But.
Yeah, Brian is a magician when it comes to mural and virtual officing. I haven't seen any PowerPoint on you, Brian, so I'm going to need to just check to see how's your PowerPoint game versus your mural game. I'm sure they're both pretty good.
Man, we got a scrum board going. We got this mural board for this book looks like a beautiful mind.
It's like a mind map.
I have it up. Would you like for me to share it?
No, please don't.
Okay.
That's all intellectual property.
There you go.
But it's
I don't think I could read
scraps. There's photos of family. There's just ideas. Oh, so a lot of the things that you talk about, Felipe, and you share, I'm so appreciative because like I just eat it like it's or breathe it like it's oxygen, and that's why we have to like talk about this specifically, this subject matter specifically, because so people become aware of that and learn and share it with others. And like those things that we use, and hand signals that rangers use when there's a helicopter around is important, because you can't say, hey, move to the left, like, because it's so loud. You couldn't even talk on the radio. You have to use signaling, things like that. What was the
back in my day, Thomas, we didn't have individual radios, so signaling was all we
yes.
had.
What was the and the Just Cause? What was the things on your
Oh,
helmet?
they put these
The IR.
IR, yeah, these IR strips of cloth on our helmets so that we stood out and made us shine very bright on the scopes of the military aircraft overhead, and they could tell the difference between us and the enemy.
So that's that same
easily.
behavior. I love that, because it's like, so if you're up in a gunship looking down, I'm really important. I don't want to shoot my own guys. But if you're looking at the plan of the day and talking about like, hey, we have this operation right here. We're digging a trench. In this trench around this, there's heavy equipment and it's moving. And this is almost the most dangerous thing that we do. I don't want anybody to walk into that thing. So I want to make what they're looking at incredibly visible. So it's the same exact behavior. So why creators invent some new wheel that's already been executed in 1990, 1991, 1989, I think, in December.
1945. I think it goes.
Yes.
back
So yeah. So
1775.
These concepts, these ways of moving that we bring forth in this book, they've been all tried and true methods, and some of them, like I get to work at a job site and we go out and experience with our team, and we get feedback, and we loop this back in, put it back on the mural board, be like, oh, that didn't work. Let's try something new. So our main character is a framing and drywall foreman. I have the really, really great people I work with at DPR who do that. So I get to communicate them every day. So I have almost an endless supply of like ideas. And that's like so awesome. So they get to be a part of that too. And I want to share that with them as well. But also, like, when we're talking about this subject of mental wellness, like that's also part of the conversation. It's not about, hey, this is the cool planning method, or what's this like really legit way to organize your tools. Like, how do you feel good when you come into work? Or like, what's a good way to get a good sleep when you only get 6 hours? Right? Because it's like, I only get 6 hours. That's all I get. So what are some really good methods to like get sleep fast and do that thing? It's like, oh, I got to get my temperature down to 65 and I got to get all the light out. Like, there's tons of tips and tricks. You just got to talk about it. And when you actually start that conversation, like, it's like floodgates open. And we're talking about like men and masculinity. And it's like, oh, we got to be so guarded. But I will tell you, when we have these conversations, and hopefully people are encouraged after listening to this conversation, that it's okay. And in fact, if you do it, it'll like open the floodgates, and no one will ever be like, dude, that's like weird, go away. And that won't ever happen. And if that happens, the person who says like, go away, they've now been identified as like a royal a-hole. They've self-identified.
Every project has at least one. It's just like there's fire extinguishers every so many feet. Every project for so many thousands of people, hundreds of workers, has at least one a-hole as well that you have to contend with. I want to ask the two of you, like, On this topic of mental health struggles in our space, and we've kind of danced around this, why do you think, from your perspectives, all your time in the business, why is it overlooked? How do we overlook it? Like, why in 2020s are we just now focusing on mental health when it's been an issue for us for a long time?
Go ahead, Brian.
I mean, I think the pandemic made the conversation start happening everywhere, right? I think it just kind of did, because, a lot of people got put in situations that are not all that mentally healthy, and no change day to day to day, the same thing, right? So I think that through that, I know that, like, I was just doing some research and stumbled across the numbers for suicide in construction, and I like started weeping. I was like, how is this possible? The numbers in the US are 16.4, I think, per 100,000 people. It's 33.2 for veterans, which is a horrible number, right? Twice as bad as the regular population. And for construction workers, it's 53.3 per 100,000 people. We lose 1,000 people a year about to construction accidents, and 4 to 5 times that to suicide, and 9 to 10 times that number to opioid overdose deaths. And it's just, we've got to, we've got to attack this thing from so many directions, Felipe. The work has to be designed better. We can't have people that have to keep their arms above their head doing the same repetitive jobs over and over all day long, every day. I go into just about any industry group of people and ask them to raise their hands and who works less than 50 hours, and nobody's hand goes up, and we've had studies that show that it's bad for you to do this over long periods of time. We do it for whole careers. So we wonder where the bad outcomes come from. It's like we keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And that's why we get bad outcomes, right? So it's kind of easy to see once we really start thinking about it. Put yourself in the place of a young Hispanic worker that's on a crew that's having to travel to a city that's not where you live to work. Thomas is traveling now, and I traveled like Thomas is traveling now, and it sucked. It was awful, having to be away from my family. But I wasn't in a hotel room with 2 or 3 or 4 other dudes, that maybe I like, maybe I don't like, and stuck there all week. Maybe I get to go home on the weekend. Maybe I'm, no, the superintendent came out and said we had to work all weekend this weekend, and that happens more times than not. On Friday afternoon, they find that out. And it's just that experience for those folks is not nearly as good as what my horrible experience was, and that's really where I think it becomes pretty easy to see where the troubles start, and where they live.
I remember working in LA some years ago, and one of the crews, the superintendent had like a pull behind, like a fifth wheel, just basically like an RV, for those of you that don't know what a fifth wheel is, because I didn't know what it was until they were telling me. And I found out halfway through the job that the crew was like, they staying together. So they had like multiple fifth wheels. And the only reason I found out was because there was conflict in the crew. And then I found out that at the end of the day, they couldn't get away and like disconnect. They went back to the same site, side by side, sometimes people in the same living space, and there's no refuge for them. And things escalate and heat up pretty fast. But before I jump onto escalation, go to that level, Thomas, you had something you want to add?
That's it. That is it. It's hidden. It's hidden. So it's like when you go outside the gate, there's no place I can't help them. They're not like under our insurance program anymore. OSHA doesn't care about them anymore. You're on your own. There's so many protections once they're inside the gate and very well regulated. But also it's hidden. what I mean by that is like, there's the story you told. There's so many, millions more of those. The problem, though, is we don't look for it. And I'm not saying like blaming people, is like, this is a human behavior that we as a human being or as a society don't, we go out of our way not to look for these problems. Just because, one, it's unsettling. And then two, I have to confront it, and now I have to take action on it. So if I just don't look for it. So what we put in this chapter there, it's about, I don't know, a third of the way down. It's one of those, it's like a Connex box, but it's one of those fifth wheel situations. And this is on the job site where we don't go looking. There are so many hiding places where people suffer on construction sites, especially large ones, even smaller ones, closets, electrical rooms, stairwells. I used to have panic attacks and I would go hide in stairwells so no one would see me. So even if like I had insurance, I could go see mental wellness professionals, whatever, like, and it took someone catching me for me to go get help because I was passed out, right? I couldn't hide. And so, because I was laying on the ground unconscious. And so that was the impetus to change. But what we put in this picture, and maybe you can include this in your show notes, is this photo, and it looks into the back of a Connex, and it's messy and it's dirty. And it's like, Brian and I were talking about it. Brian's like, I can hear the hinges creak. Like you feel.
I can smell the metal. When
you can smell the mold and the dust and the like sweaty, like you hang up your harness that you wear all day in this, and then at night you close it up so it's not going to dry out. And then in the lower right corner, there's a coffee cup, and the coffee cup sets me off every time. I keep talking about this, and the reason why is because if I'm going to go in there and suffer in that place, I'm going to set my coffee cup outside, because I don't want the mold, the dust, the sadness, the death zone to get into my coffee, because that's gross. And this is what a conscious thought that I would probably have. That's not my picture. That's not my coffee cup. But I know that's the same mindset. That's why I know this happens more than once. This is a repetitive behavior. This is a problem that happens all over the world.
And you can go into just about any Connex on any project site in America, and there's going to be a coffee cup sitting about right where that one is.
So it's like, I now have taught people to look for signs. And they're very subtle, but these are places where people suffer. No one is going to have a panic attack, very rarely, in the middle of the all hands safety meeting, right? Or no one's going to say, hey, during our, and these are very well intended, like meetings that we had during, construction suicide prevention, very well attended, very well done, professionally done. I was in awe of a lot of the content and the links and the resources that got shared. It was very well done. But like, when you ask, hey, has anybody had, the feelings of that, no one would raise their hand, because you don't want to, that's not the place for that, right? You get outcast. And then if you look weak, and as men in construction, if you look weak, then you're less than. That's just the way it is. There's a lot we can do to fix that, but there's a lot we can do to seek out these places where people suffer. So we wanted to include that and show a picture of a place. That's just one place. There are many, many more. But if it's a problem where people hide, and if we don't look for it, it'll never be found. And if it's a problem where we're not looking for it, and it happens, a suicide that's unexpected, suddenly facts become incredibly clear. So we say that in the story, like Alberto was taking pills, he was depressed, and this was his wife at the funeral. She's in the middle of her grieving moment and just spewing facts. And the reason why none of this was surfaced before, this would have been great information a week ago because we could have took action on it. But the reason why this is not available a week ago, because it was hidden and we couldn't do anything with it. So the reason why it all comes out after the facts and it's like, oh, all these signs were incredibly clear is because that person can't hide it. They're gone. They're dead. And if you think about it in construction, I use a roof leak as an example because it's a kind of similar kind of behavior. It's like a poorly executed, like a parapet wall detail, kind of complicated. And if we get 3 inches of rain in a day in like South Florida, suddenly it's like leaking in the building and everything's getting wet. And it's like, oh, that detail sucks. Like that was poorly executed. Why didn't we do the inspection or whatever? Right. So then you're up there and you're tearing it apart and all kinds of consultants get involved and it gets fixed. Problem with suicide, it's forever. You can't rework. And impulsive behavior can kill you. And we wanted to share that with people. And we wanted to tell that story that I choose death over any other outcome is a very, very real feeling that people have. And I was before this, before we started this podcast, Felipe, I was trying to get myself in a frame of mind. I was listening to a Tim Ferriss podcast. He's the guy that did the 4-Hour Work Week book. Cool guy. He was likening suicide. He actually idealized suicide. You got it behind you?
They're right.
He's pointing at it. He was telling the story about when he was idealizing suicide. He was likening it to a person, like the people, this is unsettling, but this is a heavy topic, who jumped out of the Twin Towers during 9/11. And that was their choice. They said they would either jump out of the building and die or burn to death. And so when he was feeling at his lowest point, that was almost the same way he was feeling. And it took him seeking out help. And thankfully he did because he had it all planned out. So I wanted to share that with people that in construction, you're not alone. You have many, many resources. And in your lowest moment, you have to catch yourself, because if it's a hidden problem and nobody's looking for it, you have to take action on yourself. It's super hard to do, but what's more important is if there are signs to other people around you, your friends, your family, your coworkers, we got to look for it. We got to look for it, and we got to learn what to look for. I'm getting hung up on my words here.
Well, and then if you are at that spot, just reach out to me, reach out to Thomas. You can talk to either of us. We will talk to you. We want you here. We still need a whole lot of people in construction. We don't need to lose any. And this is the worst way to lose them, because like Thomas said, there's no coming back from this. So we want you here.
I put my phone numbers on LinkedIn as well. It's public. It's at thefelipe.bio.link. My phone number is right there. It calls right to my cell phone, not to an answering service. It goes right to me. And I had a gentleman that I met, also used to work at Turner, called me some years ago. It was like a random call, like calling to check in on something. And I sensed something was wrong in the conversation. I'd already been trained how to intervene, and we ended up having about a 3.5 hour, nearly a 4-hour conversation. And later, he said that I saved his life. I stopped him from ideating and going further. That little giving some time of 4 hours to talk about things that he was going through and just normalizing the feelings allowed him to get some space and some perspective to stay in the game. And it's like both of you have said it, like these things happen. And it doesn't take a lot. Like for me to listen to somebody talk, it was free. It didn't really cost anything. and I had family members where I was were coming up to me because that haven't seen me do such a long call. I mean, they see me on Teams like all day long or on Zoom, but to be on a cell phone for that long of a time, I had to, tell them to hold on a second and reassure my family that I was okay. And this was a good conversation needed to happen.
Yeah.
So you can't get help. And Brian and Thomas, absolutely right. Like, reach out. This type of stuff happens. Thomas, as you were talking, I wanted to share. I was crossing the Bay Bridge recently, and I was with somebody. We were carpooling, and they'd mentioned being on a project where every single week they went to the bathroom and cried every single week on a construction project because of what was happening on the project. And it was not once, it wasn't like once a week. It was multiple times a week, sometimes more than once in a day. And we got interrupted because of, traffic and some other stuff. We couldn't continue the conversation, but it just came out of nowhere. Like, all of a sudden the conversation shifted and the person just said, this was happening to me. And so if you make space and talk and listen, let people, let some air out, some vent out. Like, but I've been on so many calls with the person, I never would have guessed that they had those types of experiences based on how they show up in meetings and how they show up on the site. So I just want to reiterate, like, when Thomas is saying and Brian is saying in the article, like, it's hard to see these things if it's not in an open public place, like finding Thomas, passed out. It's hidden. People hide this because it's not acceptable. It's not okay to cry in meetings today in construction. And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon based on the type of culture we have. But if you're in a situation where something like that happens, stop the damn meeting, people. Stop the damn meeting. If you see people getting to the edge where it's getting that heated, stop the damn meeting and, like, walk away. Give people some space. You can always come back and let people compose themselves. And it could even be a day or two later or a week later. Let's just stop this bullshit about everything has to be this exact second at this exact moment. Like, I've seen jobs shut down for a month due to some stuff and still finish on time. So let's just take the pressure off of each other for what we're doing. I want to ask the two of you, just one more.
That's heavy. That's heavy.
Yeah,
Thank you for sharing.
One more level, because that recognizing it's so hard. And I think with your experience, both of you having your lived experience, you can see this stuff. What do you see when you can recognize that there's something here and we need to escalate to get somebody help? What are each of you? Let's go to Brian first, because Thomas, we'll let you recover.
When you see someone doing something out of character for them, if someone is normally always gregarious and fun and you see them being quiet or not being themselves. I mean, when you see a big change in someone's personality, it's time to ask them, is something going on? What's happening in your life right now outside of work? Or what's happening in your life right now at work? Is there something frustrating going on? And it's not, are you okay? It's those leading questions that get them to start talking about what's happening, and you have to look at them and watch for clues and see, and maybe they don't talk to you that day because they don't know you, they don't trust you necessarily. And by showing that you're genuinely interested, you're not going to crowd them and give them a hard time or whatever, you can start to build that trust with them. And it sounds like that's what happened with you. There was someone that you'd worked with that had seen how, you reacted in tense situations, and it made it feel like that you're someone they could share with, and that's a special place to be. That's something really precious to be sort of have bestowed upon you, it never fails to make me very, very humble when someone shares their trouble with me, because just like we talk about in the story, just like with Emilio, there but for the grace of God go I. I mean, my mental health struggles have been long and hard, it's nothing that I haven't overcome many, many times. I've had lots of success in my career. It's not like that. It's more of, wanting to be better, wanting to be a better person, and wanting to have happiness and the right things and enjoy the right things in life. So yeah, those are all possible, even in construction. You can be happy and be a superintendent. You can. It's possible.
I used to say I have varying levels of satisfaction.
Well, and I mean, just like we hear people talk about work-life balance, and I don't know that I subscribe to that. I think there's seasons, right? I think there's seasons in your life where you probably got to, work is going to require more of you than other times. It's just that in construction, we never go out of season, it seems like, and we need to allow folks to have those seasons in their life when they have stuff they have to take care of in their family. Let them go take care of it. Those employees are going to be, it's not your low price. It's not any of that stuff that gets you that return business. It's those employees that are out there impressing that owner with the job that they're doing. Yeah.
Oh, Thomas, like I think that show you did with me, talk about the Bay Bridge and showing some pictures. It was foreshadowing, because now I'm crossing that bridge 8 times a week. How about you, Thomas?
It's a perfect like case study and theory of constraints. You can hopefully you teach people that. You'd be like, imagine if there was somebody with air running out of their tire, and imagine if somebody's about to run out of gas, and imagine if there was a car on fire, which is a constraint. Well, they're all constraints. But the primary one is guy on fire, but that one's going to suck up all of our resources, right? But what's the one that could be like the most satisfying? Could fix the tire, right? Takes the least amount of resources. We can knock that one off the list and feel good, but it does nothing. It does nothing. It's waste, even, because it sucks resources away from your major constraint, right? It's the same thing here in this, the last section of this chapter. It's in a meeting. So they're at the trade partner meeting. And so Emilio, our character, got some training. He got some first aid, mental health training. If you go through the sections. And now he learned the signs, and he sees Carl, this plumbing foreman, who's the normal. You said there's always like a fire extinguisher. There's always one. Well, he's one of those. He's the silver fox. He knows all the tricks, and he knows how to set off the GC superintendent. But in this meeting, he doesn't do it. He doesn't do it, and no one else noticed. No one else even noticed. Except for Emilio.
Some folks even like purposely didn't notice, right?
Yeah. And it's fleeting. These are those little moments. Even if it might not be even action, like a coffee cup or somebody crying, it could be something that you just don't see. And in this example, which we wanted to share, and we bring up later down in the bottom, I want to get to those as well. But it's these little tiny moments that mean so much. They're so heavy, because you can actually catch somebody right before they go and make a really bad decision, and you can actually catch them. And this actually happened, that this guy's life is about to spiral, and that Alberto's death spiked it. And they actually have a conversation. They're like, what does it mean? He's like, my life is spiraling right now, and I've been beat up, and no one even caught it. And when you're in that spiraling situation, or when I was in a panic attack, the last thing on my mind was 988. The last thing. It's like not even in your mind. It's like, oh, what was that resource pamphlet that I got? Like, where was that I'm like scrolling through my phone. Like, no, that's for later. the last thing that you think about are those things. The first thing you think about is what was in your front of your mind. Like, I'm freaking out that my life is spiraling ahead of me. And I don't know what to do. This is like your fight or flight, that your amygdala and your brain is taking over. And it's so powerful, it'll trick your own body. That's why you need things like Scrum to like organize your mindset to make decisions, because your own brain will trick you into doing biased things. So we wanted to show that in that last section, that it's a fleeting thing, but you can actually make a big difference just by catching, just as like he wasn't his normal self. And Emilio saw Carl and he said, "Hey man, let's have a conversation. I'm going to buy you a cup of coffee. Let's put space between this job and this situation, and let's just go have a conversation." And it didn't solve the problem, but at least it took it from a 9 down to a 2, like that. And that's all it takes. And sometimes that could save a life. And we wanted to share that. And Brian, you wrote a big part of that. I know we meshed a little bit on that one. But I really like that one. I like that one a lot. And it goes, and that story continues because there's a coffee shop scene. There's other characters that get involved. It's like, it gets all juicy and good. I want to say that as well. But that's how that whole story starts, was just a little fleeting moment. It's just really, really small and seemingly insignificant, but you know what? That's real life. That's real life. That's all I got.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. Brian, you have something you want to add?
No, yeah, just, the section after that, I guess I really kind of, I don't know, we can spend some time there where we start with sort of a quote, we put the third stanza of the Ranger Creed on there. And then we sort of offer some things. And, Thomas came up with a really good point when we were sort of talking through this. We called it an after action review, which is a sort of a military term. But I mean, we do those things, we do our plus deltas, that's how people improve, hot wash. They've been called a lot of names over the years.
Sounds really cool too.
Yeah. And, we wanted to offer, we understand foremen are very busy. They often have their tools on and stuff. And we felt, again, that it's important that the tools are there. So at the very, very bottom, we've got maybe some resources and stuff. And our intent, when that is a book, that will be something that they can go download a poster that they can put up in their Connex that has these numbers on them or these resources on them or whatever. So that will be coming, that'll change eventually. But to have those sort of breakout points where we sort of talk about what sort of, sort of study the action teamish a little bit, just kind of break down some of the points from the chapter. We kind of wanted to do that. Not that that's all of them. And shoot, I hope people find more, so, yeah.
I think that's going to be really useful and helpful. And I like that in that example, you're talking about after this tragic event, some training was sought after to take action and do something for the people that are still here. And I want to ask you all, how do you think leadership can balance the pressures of what the workers are seeing while ensuring that workers feel safe, even just talking about it? In that example you gave from the Post, they go out for coffee one-on-one separately.
Yeah, I mean, I think that leaders can offer to do that with their people, but a lot of times leaders aren't necessarily in the right position to do that, because it's hard to tell your leader that something's wrong with my head. That's not an easy conversation to get into somebody who's in charge of you being employed and not being employed, right? So that's why it's really important that we start having these leaders at all levels across the job site, not our project sites. And I mean, something that we really didn't talk about earlier, but there's no certain demographic in our industry that has the higher suicide rate. It's from the labor to CEO. It's across all spectrums, everybody. So like you said, it's not just, it's in the office, it's in the field, it's in the main office, it's everywhere. So yeah, I just think that's, we've got to start getting there. Companies having the, the understanding that like companies like Bolt, like yours, putting it out there, this is important to us, and making it a priority and showing, that we really care is going to go a long way. And I love what Thomas says. If you're ever in a situation where you're having to breathe silica dust every day, if somebody's telling you need to get down in an unprotected trench, any of these things, telling you to do something that's illegal or bad for your career, quit, leave, go immediately. You don't need to do it. None of it. None of it.
You'll find work tomorrow. Yeah. If you're skilled, we have a major shortage of workers to the need. There's no reason to ever, and that's just a physical safety thing. But Felipe, I have two for you. They're very, very, very simple. Not easy though, but they're very simple. You know how we were talking about like the hidden places on job sites? If you're a worker, I would say this: if you're a woman, if you're a working trade woman, your only like private place on most job sites is in a chemical toilet, right? Imagine that, a chemical toilet need a sanitary place to do your business. That's just not acceptable. We build buildings with wellness centers and like spas and and really good lighting, and then like HEPA filters and UV filters that get installed into the air handling systems. But like the people who do the work, it's like, do they matter? So the one thing I would say is like, if that is the only private place, that's terrible. Fix that. I'm not saying you can't have chemical toilets, but just have a better place than that. If that's the only thing, that's terrible. Fix that. So my company, I know yours as well. Many ours is Turner's big way too. Give people some grace, dignity, respect. Have a well-lit, air-conditioned place to do your business. Doesn't have to be huge. Doesn't have to be like the 25 stall one, but it could be a place for somebody to go do it. Have a biological event that we all do as a human being. That's the first one. The second one, this mentality as a leader, the Lego movie, the first one, it's like everything is awesome. We have to stop doing that. Everything is not awesome. If this work is hard, we work in elements, we work at edges, we work in elevations, we work at like the face of a building. Like, have you ever worked or been in a swing stage before? Yeah. You're basically working against a mirror. And if it's hot, it's brutal work. It's very like the glazers, iron workers that do that work, they're very proud of it. But it's very injurious to them. I'm saying that we can't eliminate that and say we don't do that anymore. That's impossible. What I'm saying is like, let's recognize that work is hard, and not pretend that it's not easier or everything is freaking awesome, because it's not. And I'm not saying it's doom and gloom either, but what I mean by that is when we post things in our social media page, we should post it with workers in the frame doing work, and not be worried about upsetting somebody, because that's the reality of it. So, or when we bring people out on site, like don't Windex the job. Your job should always be clean and organized, because that's how we work. That's just the way. So if we have to do a massive cleanup for the owner, that should be an indicator that we're probably not working in the right way. We should probably make changes. So instead of the Lego mentality, let's have an idea of current reality. And then if current reality, there's some unsettling things on there, like put those on the to-do list for improvement. Put maybe on the left-hand side of your scrum board or the top of the constraint log, and get after it. Do it.
Yeah. We have to, we need the design community and the owner community both to participate with us in this, Felipe. We've got to, the work needs to be designed better so that no one ever has to get on their hands and knees again. I mean, it's horrible. So that no one has to work overhead, 8 hours a day again. We've got to figure out ways that we can get more women involved in the work and make it so that it's equitable for them to be able to do it, so it doesn't kill them either. Like it's killing the men that do it. And owners need to understand that their responsibility isn't to the shareholders only and the future users of the space only, but also they owe a huge debt and to the people who are building it. They count and are worth just as much as those future clients and users of that space, and are just as important. And we've got to stop treating them like they're not. And they are.
I love the third stanza of the Ranger Creed. Like, never, ever shall I fail my comrades. Like, I will keep myself mentally well and sharp. Like those two things. So if you have the mentality of, I'm never going to fail anybody. I might struggle. I might not actually succeed, but like, I want to have that mindset. And then also I need to like keep myself sharp. And so in two sentences, in one stanza of a really important creed, and the people in the regiment and the people that go to that school, they like drill that in them. But like, Brian, you could say like, that's a lifestyle, right? Like you have to keep yourself sharp and never fail.
They call it living the Ranger Creed. And it, once you're a Ranger, you're expected to live the Ranger Creed the rest of your life.
It's like shouldering your share of the task. It's like, it don't matter who you are. If you're a cook, if you're like a JAG officer, anybody in that regiment, they all have to go through the same level of training and pass those set of standards. And I really like that a lot. And I like that mindset. And that's why we brought it into here. Cause it's like, if you have this mentality of, I'm going to never, ever fail them, even if it's not my job, not my company, those guys over there are morons. And it's like, if you have that mindset, even if you're at foreman level, even if you're at entry level, you catch people in situations. Now you can make space for people. You can make like pick up the trash instead of like add to the pile of it. These small little tasks. And it's like,
we are our brother's keeper.
Yes. Once these little things happen, it reinforces it in the good way. And I know we've all seen these behaviors, so that they can spiral in negative ways. They can also spiral in really positive ways. And we incorporate all these like positive, and we show some conflict along the way in this book, but we really wanted to highlight that in there in the Ranger Creed, especially the third stanza. It was just like knocks it out of the park, because it's like 3 sentences that just resonates deeply with even as a civilian with me, and then as just the principles of like mental health and mental wellness. You got to keep yourself sharp. We say in the bottom in some of the after action reviews, like, this is a reason why you put your oxygen mask on first in the event of emergency on an airplane, is because if you don't help yourself in a low oxygen environment, you'll pass out and you can't help anybody. And actually you're now a burden, because you're a limp body that weighs, it's heavy, right? So, and you're in the way. So yeah, you got to take care of yourself first as a priority. And that's hard to do. It's hard to do as when you're in a family environment, and it's also hard to do when you're in these team environments or high stress and like large projects, where you feel pressured to be perfect. You're
driving to work.
Yes.
You're driving to work 2 hours every day, working 10 hours and driving 2 hours home. Yeah. When do you stress me in that environment?
Yes.
Working 6 days a week. That's rough.
Yes. So like one easy one, and I'll let you take this one, Brian, because you tell the story so well. Those last 2 hours of sleep that I say most people, especially Bay Area people, that's like half the reason why I moved to the Southeast, so I could get those 2 hours of sleep. So I didn't have to get on a BART. But geez. Anyways, if you get those last 2 hours of sleep, study have shown those last 2 hours of sleep are the most important, like, because they're so beneficial to the human body. It helps your health, all the hormones, helps your growth. It helps you recover, all of the stuff, right? It's very, very important. If you're not getting it, you get really poor quality sleep. But if you can't get it, it's impossible. Oftentimes we will reach for substances in two directions. So one, we need to get energy up in the morning and during the day. So the easiest one is when you're driving in. If you're going to come in from like Modesto or Merced, you've got to gas up, and guess what is in arm's reach right there when you pay for gas? Like White Monster.
Yep.
Take it, Brian.
Take the name out, Felipe. Edit the name out.
I had one on Friday.
We have nothing against White Monster.
I still enjoy them.
The energy drinks, and then from the energy drinks, you drink those all day. You got to go home and hit that 36 Keystones just to go to sleep, right? It's a vicious cycle.
It's one of those cycles. Yeah,
it is.
And we're not even conscious of it. And then you think about like the font and like in the chapter, he's like looking at the label, and he's like, there's this video game character is like a special forces guy, and it's like, this is like aimed at men and masculinity, and it's going right at it. It's like it's okay to do this. Like, it should also be okay to recognize that we shouldn't be abusing these substances. It might be okay to take it in moderation, but in heavy quantities over long periods of time, it's not. Because why? Because you're not getting those last 2 hours of sleep, because it's impossible. Yeah.
Back when I was in the field, it was a 6-pack of Mountain Dew every day. It was just different substance, but same thing. It's just whatever you got to do to get by.
Yeah, Mountain Dew is an energy drink now too, Brian.
They have a lot. It's always been an energy drink, though, Felipe, honestly.
No, I got me through many engineering courses at university myself. I'll say that.
Me too, 100%.
Comments that Brian are talking about is 100% real. When I shifted and started crossing the Bay Bridge, it's about 300-mile round trip for me, that commute. I noticed something changed recently. When I'm doing my Starbucks order, and I'm not a Starbucks person that just like has to have coffee, but now I do, because the difference is that sleep quality. I've watched my sleep go from the time I had before the commutes, and I used to get up early, like at 5 a.m., like nobody's business, but the going to bed, winding down after driving 150 miles is not the same as finishing work at 5 o'clock or even 6 o'clock. Because let's be real, like a lot of us work past 5. If you're winding down after 8 o'clock, you just got out of your garage or parked your car at 8 p.m., 9 p.m., because sometimes there could be 10 accidents, and I'm not exaggerating. There could be 10 accidents on the way back from San Francisco to Sacramento, and that adds time, 30 minutes or more, to that drive time. And what's happened to me, Thomas, is that I'm now adding espresso shots to my coffee, and I now have to stop. My GPS even predicts in the morning. I get in my car, and it says, I know you're going here, but here's that stop that you always stop at. And I thought, damn you.
Want to order ahead?
I was like, damn you, Apple. No, it's just the map. The map GPS function knows that I will stop at this, and it's like an hour from my destination every time. And I'm getting an espresso shot to my coffee because I can't make it. And it's at that time. I've had some dangerous moments driving recently where luckily I have a car that's got Safety Sense 2.0. Shout out to Toyota, like not sponsoring my podcast, but you've saved my life. Toyota Safety Sense 2.0 has saved my life in the last 8 months more than 4 times.
That's scary, Felipe.
Yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, I mean, as someone with sleep apnea, that's scary. And I know, like I didn't, didn't have my test done until just a few years ago. And I wake up 73 times an hour is what my score was. It's horrible. And as someone who's had to travel a lot, it got to a point where instead of driving on Monday morning I'd get up and leave at 3 a.m. in the morning to drive to Houston from San Antonio. I'd leave on Sunday because I knew I didn't want to die, and I knew there was ever a very real possibility that I very much could. And so, instead of being able to sneak out at 3 a.m. in the morning when my daughter's asleep, now my 7-year-old daughter's outside on the front porch hanging on my leg. Daddy, please don't go, on Sunday afternoon. And it's horrible to have to make those choices, right? It just takes something out of you to have to make those choices. I want to live, so I have to make my daughter very unhappy, and it just sucks. And it's a real part of our industry. What did you say, Thomas? Like up to 40% of our industry are super commuters?
Well, this was a study that was done like more than 2 years ago. So it's probably increased, but about 50% of like trade workers. It's probably higher in places like where you're at, Felipe.
Yeah.
But about 50% of our workers are super commuters, and a super commuter is defined as more than 2 hours each way. So it sounds like you're in that book lately. I am. I certainly would be if I went back and forth every day. I'm grateful to not have to do that, but
It's still not at home, right?
yeah,
I mean, it's
but
yeah.
so sometimes you put yourself in great risk just getting to work. Not only but it's like if you work 10 hours a day and then you drive 2 hours a week, and then Thomas here, he at the all hands meeting, he gave me this pamphlet that said that last 2 hours of sleep is really important. So I got to get 8 hours. Like, when are you talking to your family, or hitting the gym, or having any of these like wellness cycles, like any kind of repeatable yoga class, meditation? Like, it's really hard. All of the things to get into. I'm like a freaking health junkie now, but like I have really flexible hours now. I finally like achieved management level where I have some people who can cover and have that, and I'm grateful for it. But I still work like crazy. But a lot of people don't. They have to be there at 6 a.m. every single day, open a gate, right? Like, there's no flexibility. And if you don't have that flexibility, and you have to like have a family life, you take away really like life beneficial things that you're really good for your body, and like eating well, getting good sleep, like getting exercise, like all the things that we know about that are good for you. We just can't get to it. It's impossible, or it's really difficult. And then it's like, oh, I had this like HIIT class to get to, but like there's a wreck on the Martinez Bridge, and I got hosed. I missed it. So it's hard. So our work is very here and now. We can't have a gym often in our workspace because our workspace is very temporary, and that's just the nature of our work. You can't really fix that. It's hard. So you have to kind of take action on yourself. And the first one you could do to take action by yourself is to prioritize those things. And those things seemingly might feel like I might make less money, or I might get myself out of the selection cycle for promotion. And you get into the higher levels of management, and the selection criteria, or the selection to get to the next level gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And you want to get there because your earning potential goes up. But to get to those positions, it's really hard, really hard. You got to get after it. So the only thing that you can do is work harder, and that's promotable. But what you're sacrificing is your aliveness, like your wellness. And I don't want to die when I'm 58, and I don't want to die by my own hand either. So I would rather prioritize wellness and my mental, sanity over any of that. And that's just me. And I know I'm not alone anymore. So I'll trade that off. And I want to say that other people who are struggling with that it's okay. And in fact, when you give yourself space and you give yourself some time off, you will come back stronger. If you work really efficiently and smartly, you'll look just as good as the people who hit it for 12 hours a day. In fact, you might look better because you communicate better. If you use a Scrum board and you like really communicate and like work well with your design team, and they love you and they recommend you to your next client, like, oh, you'll get movement. So you might look weird for like this long, but that doesn't matter, because like, one, you're happy, and two, you're like, hopefully you can take care of yourself. And if that is not encouraged, or if that is like, if this is like, what are you, stupid? Like, this is lame, leave immediately. There's no place for that. If that's not promotable, you're in the wrong place. There are many good companies. Felipe and I work for two of them, but there are way many more. There are so many more. And we are hiring big time. And Brian, I know you can find many people, you can make connections as well. So both two things that I kind of want to, if we're wrapping up here in a second, I want to tell people that we are not alone, and take care of yourself, because that's all it is worth. Is at the end of the day is that's all you got is you.
Well, and you can't take care of anybody else unless you take care of you first. You just can't.
Absolutely
You're not.
right.
It's impossible.
I love that. And we're not wrapping yet, Thomas. So
Okay.
Everyone take a breath. It's all it takes.
Getting dusty in here though.
Okay. So, back to the post, the first chapter of your book, you had some self-care examples. And I think what emerged, if my memory is right, was a breathing practice. Mm-hmm. Who penned that one? Who takes the credit? Who's to share more about that breathing practice? And then I'll share.
It's one I use almost every day. I use it a lot. It's one my therapist taught me. Box breathing is another one that you may have heard of, and that's breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, and breathe out for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, and just continuing on. But yeah, so I mean, he had a flashback, and he recognized it, and he knew what to do because he'd been in that situation before. He's in therapy. I mean, he talks about talking to his therapist, because of his military experience. And it's something that probably more in the construction industry, because there's a lot of trauma in the construction industry, that, it's something we probably need more of and more people to talk about. And we're starting to hear that people are going to therapy, and it's, with BetterHelp and all the other ones that are online now, it's getting relatively reasonable. I mean, you don't have to be rich to go have therapy anymore. There are even programs out there which will help cover the cost if you can't afford it. There's a lot of different things you can do. So, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Brian. Yeah. I recently started taking more advantage of my Apple Watch. Has a breathing app with the 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute interval. And I don't do anything less than 3 minutes minimum with it now. And I found that there's what they call the long exhale, a 10-minute guided meditation through an app I have on my phone. And people just find what works for you. I'm not even going to name the app because it's premium, and it's not cheap. But I take these 10 minutes, and you lie on your back, you tuck you kind of like put your feet flat, so you got like a triangle shape with your legs, but your knees are together, and you're lying flat on your back, and you breathe out just a little bit longer than you breathe in. So it kind of slows your breath down. What happens after that is that the same app that makes that recommendation, it's measuring my heart rate variability, and I can reduce my stress based on their algorithm by like 20% by taking 10 minutes to breathe out a little bit longer than I breathe in. 20% stress reduction is insane, off the charts. Like what it does, it's just taking 10 minutes to breathe. And I had to start doing that practice because of the work that I'm involved in. And I was looking at this app as a visual indicator. Thomas, we like visuals. I'll put a screenshot of what it looks like, but it looks like boiling red water or boiling red paint when you're very high stress. And right now we're in this conversation. I'm feeling pretty good. I'm at 75% orange, and green is like, you're at a spa. It's like green. And since I've gotten this app, I almost never see green. Almost never. I went on vacation with my family for a week. We were gone for a week. It wasn't until one day before we were coming back that I finally hit green. And so for everybody, if you don't take that time, take vacation, do what Thomas and Brian are saying, like this happens to me too. It's happening to me too. Me too. +1 to what Thomas said, +1 to what Brian said. You're not alone. And if you talk about this with other people, chances are they're experiencing the same thing you're experiencing. Chances are. And I don't know why or how, but when you talk to other people, it makes things better.
The reward center in our brain. That's how it makes things better. Just by getting these things off, it releases the dopamine and all that kind of good stuff. And it's why helping people makes you feel good, right? I mean, it's why, being the person that someone can talk to, even though it's very stressful. If someone is in distress, it can be very stressful. I have to be very careful with my self-care after I've talked to someone that's in distress, and make sure that I go and maybe even do some breathing exercises or something like that. Because, it can take a lot out of you. These are hard to hear things. These are heavy. We understand that. And that's why this is chapter 1. That's why we made this chapter 1, because we otherwise, why change, right? I mean, things can go along as they are, but this is our impetus for change. And we kind of addressed that in the after action report too, and this is our why for the book. This is why things change for them.
It's it's nuanced too. Like right out of the gate, character goes back to a firefight in Afghanistan, and he deals with that sudden death of his friend Ryan in a firefight, and he's feeling the same feelings. So it's like I'm having these same emotions at years later, but I can go back and touch it, and the thing that helped me then in that environment can help me now. So he has to calm himself. And then also, like, he was a fire team leader, so he was leading a team. What's the fire team? 5 to 7?
4 to 5 too.
4 to 5. So he was like, I gotta like talk to my crew. So he does that in this chapter. Like, he takes the leadership and standpoint. He's like, I gotta communicate this thing because they need to know, because the truth will come out anyways. So he needs to get ahead of it. But the first thing he does before he goes and texts and does it in a flurry, just like you said, Felipe, you get yourself down, you get yourself calm. I haven't had a panic attack in a long time. You're never over it. You learn how to live. I think that's what people, maybe if you haven't done therapy, you're not cured.
Promise still there.
I'm still here. You learn to live, and you get, this is hard because some of the first set of treatments you get will be medication. And for some people, medication works because it's chemical imbalances in your brain, and the medications can kind of help with that, or it's hormonal, or it's your nervous system, so it can kind of level you out. The problem with medication is that you have to stay on it, or you take too much, or the food, or your sleep, or other things get in the way. So life happens. So you just have to understand that also,
Yeah.
and it's expensive too. So like you have to understand.
I've heard lots of people say that the medication makes them feel like they're not themselves.
That was my problem. So the medications for me took the edge off, and it takes the edge off of all of the things that really gave me stress. I'm like, oh, no, don't worry about it. The problem though is like, hey, Thomas, we got to move the concrete placement from tomorrow to 2 weeks from now. I'd be like, whatever. Yeah. So like you can't live all of your emotions, like all of your emotions are now affected with medication. So like you have to also understand that if you're in a person who needs to be able to make quick decisions, if you're taking medication, you have to understand that. So for me, I had to seek out a different style of therapy. So you have to recognize that too, that your first foray into that treatment might not be for you, and that's okay. Like you have to learn how to adjust. And so we wanted to show that in that book, that like you have to like take upon what you learn, what you know, and then adjust from there. And that sometimes the first thing that you do might not be the right step, but the thing about taking a step is that you can immediately pivot. The worst thing you can do is do nothing, because then it's like, oh, what do we do? We're all confused. And then the rumor mill starts, and then it's like this whole situation. But even if you took the wrong step, you can immediately take that step and be like, you know what, this medication don't work for me. And then guess what? If you didn't say that and you just kept taking it, you could go down have a bad outcome doing that, or mix it with alcohol. That would be really bad. So what you have to do is also communicate that, like keep communicating, keep talking about it. And I wanted to say that, and we included that in this chapter, is like, he goes, recon first. Because he remembered from his training, the first thing I got to do is find out. And like I was taught, we were like communicating the book, and part of a reconnoiteur, what is it? Reconnaissance. Yes. So when you do reconnaissance, the almost the last set of reconnaissance, they call it leader reconnaissance. And the leader reconnaissance might be from a helicopter, it might be from a drone, might be from satellite images, might only be on a map. But it's all of the stuff that got gathered, from the earlier, like information gathering. And before you make a decision, you have to like take all this together. I'm like, this is really good idea. Like you have to take.
You got to make sure that the situation on the ground matches everything you've been told, right? And that's what that leader's recon is for, is to get your own eyes on. One thing I did want to say, we haven't really talked a lot about the story.
He said it. That's what I was going for. It's like you take everything together, and like the leader needs to make the decision. You don't make it out of your gut. You don't make it based on your, like the last project that we did it. You make on current situation, specificity, and adaptation. And that like we make the right decision. And then once we make the decision, we freaking roll. And I love that. That's why and you move and the violence of action. You can do that in your personal life, like I did. Like take action, go talk to your doctor, be like, this ain't working, go find some other thing, and then I'm still here. You can keep talking about it. What do you got, Brian?
Yeah, just the story, it's not a graphic depiction of suicide. I know that's what the title might suggest, but it's really the aftermath, and it's what happens to all the people after, right? And how that they have to deal with that and the impact that it has. I mean, you know, we open up the story with Emilio looking at his phone, having just gotten notified, you know, and that's where he goes to his flashback and starts his breathing treatment and or his meditation and all that, you know, to get back on track. But he had to go tell his guys the next morning, that the rest of his crew the next morning. And think about having to do that, you know, and having to be that leader that has to do that. You know, and then he knew the guy's wife and knew his kids' names, right? He knew Alberto's wife and kids' names, and he had to go. You know, he had to see her at the funeral, and he didn't have anything to say to her to make her feel better. You know, I mean, he was still hurting too, and there was nothing he could say that he knew there was nothing he could say that was going to make her feel better. And it's just, you know, we follow that progression, and that's kind of what, you know, we wanted to show with this, because that's kind of how it feels when something like that happens on a project. You know, it's just like you blink and it's days later, and you're having to do something, you know, having to go to a funeral, you're having to, and like Thomas says, that doesn't change the fact that you still got to get that in-wall inspection done, right? You still got all this work pressure that's still there every day.
Yeah, life still happens. You still gotta get that end wall signed off. You know, you got the concrete pour or whatever. Like
Coming Tuesday.
It's
Tuesday at 1
happen.
a.m. You know, the pump truck will be there.
Mm-hmm.
It was interesting when I first read it, and I read it a few times. On the third read, I realized that you guys had some headers saying 2 weeks later. Everything was coming from weeks after the event when Alberto took his life, and I think that was like really impactful to see how, and like you set the scene, and suddenly something just triggers, like the remembrance comes out of nowhere. I think that's so real, because that's all that happens. We just had this happen on a site with the team, and it's been like, you know, random things happen. Suddenly you find yourself in the break room, and you remember the last time you saw that person was in the break room, and nobody's around, and you're just like standing in front of the coffee machine like a weirdo, not even moving, because you're remembering that person's not coming back. They're never going to step to this machine again, and get pissed off that we can't, you know, get real cream.
We did that. Actually, thank you for pointing that out. That was a very conscious thing we did. If you've dealt
We worked
with
on that till almost the very end of the writing of that, getting that right.
Yeah,
you know, figuring out what that was
took a
like.
while. You live your life, especially when you deal with unexpected death. You kind of deal with it in scenes, because it's very, once the person has died, they're kind of on a schedule. Right, there's a whole path you go down all the way to their funeral, and that
interment.
Yeah, so that happens. But then also what you're talking about, Felipe, is like payroll is going to come by, and their timesheets probably going to come in, their name's going to be on it. You might see their name on meeting notes. They might still be CC'd on emails for weeks. A pay stub or a payroll check might show up and be like, what do I do with this? So you notice that, but they also get longer and more spread out. Because that's also what happens. It seems like, oh, this is such a thing, and I'll never forget about it. And it's so like we need to make these drastic changes, but what really happens is it kind of fades. Things fade away, but you get a little memory and it fades away. But what we want to say here is that Alberto didn't die for nothing. He died for something. And some of the names that we use in here are real names that we remember. Some of the names that we use are fictional, and their real characters are protected to protect the innocent. But
some of the names are some of my teammates that I served with that have passed away. Not necessarily in war or anything like that, but just friends of mine and guys that I love and I miss. Yeah.
that we never want to forget them. So a lot of the improvements that this crew will make, they will make, and they will remember Alberto. And it happens, well, right away in the next chapter, heavy way, and not always in a great way. So there's conflict along the way too. But
Yeah. Even though we're not finished writing the book, we don't necessarily expect a happy ending. Like, you know, the project is saved by the trade partner. I mean, because that's not realistic. You know, I mean,
absolutely,
you're never going to change some things, you know, that are happening because no matter that you've got a contractual relationship with all of these trade partners, you know, up to 25, 30 or however many there are on your project, they don't work for your company. You know, you're not in the same company. Each has their own distinct culture and you know, what's important to them and all of that. So, you know, it's a contractual relationship, sure, and it's a partnership, sure. It's a team, sure, but they all have, you know, they don't all work for the same people. So it's different.
Yeah.
You have to keep that in mind.
But what they do develop are great processes, tight bonds, the friendships get developed. The stuff from home gets brought in. It gets really juicy. But what we're trying to say
it gets
is like,
scrummy. That's what it gets. It gets awful scrummy.
Like they are thrust into change right out of the gate from a death. And it wasn't like we started it. I was like, oh, we should like, and this is what I sound like. We should like tell them to get into wellness and like working out and like, and that kind of stuff. And like, I want to take a picture of my Timex Ironman and post it on Facebook at 4:30 in the morning. Like 4:30 in the morning, Jocko, I'm in the road. Like sick brag, bro, from San Diego. Like I'm already at the gate. So he'll probably choke me out in San Diego, but
we'll definitely have him choke you down. I'll be there with camera ready.
But like it's that. It's you give people space and all of a sudden you like enjoy work. And if you enjoy work, you make these incredible bonds with people. And I have friends now. I talk to all kinds of people all over the place. I've made friends. I've run into people I've worked with in Las Vegas last week in deep South Carolina, like South Carolina.
South Carolina.
Yes. And we were like reflecting on a project we worked on years ago, almost 20 years ago. And we were like make a connection about it. But like what we were talking about was like that project sucked. Like it was like, and I want to be your friend now. So like I have friends and like deep connections and run into people now and be like, that was the best project I ever worked on, was that one. And I will love hearing that. That's like my like oxygen now. I want to hear that more. Or it's like, Thomas, when we come to your project, it's like coming to a different company. I was like, yes. And I'm not bragging about that, but maybe I am just a little. But I really appreciate that, because like what we're trying to do is build an environment where people feel like they have some enjoyment, or at least they're given some grace. And so as a leader, I want to give that. And guess what happens? They're happy, they're satisfied, and they work way harder than if I was going to be like, if you're not here on this date, then we're going to deduct $5,000 from your boss's contract. Like, okay, whoop-de-doo. Like, you're going to take it out of my paycheck? Like, that's not motivating for them. All they're going to get is yelled at by their boss. Like, they're already in trouble. They haven't even showed up to your job site. Like, I don't want them to have to be in trouble and be pissed off on their first day of work. That's not the right environment. So we have to set that up. So are there ways as project leaders to help with mental wellness? Yeah. And a lot of them aren't not that hard. Some of them are very, very difficult. We have to like rearrange things or really say like challenge unrealistic demands placed upon us, like challenge those things. And those are difficult choices to make, no doubt. No doubt they're difficult because we're highly competitive. But if more of us do that, I think the industry could shift. And I think it is already shifting. So I'm happy to be there. But if you want to really make some change at the face of work, listen to the guys at the face of work. And also half the time, you don't even have to listen. Go out and walk the job and look. Are you seeing smiling faces? Are you seeing scowls?
I have a theory. I do. You know, we talked about the suicide rate for veterans. And a lot of the reason that we get that kind of rate for veterans is that once they get out, you know, so military people deploy to austere locations all the time. Like not all of them are that way. I get it, but a lot of austere locations. But what they have is they have the unit around them. That's a community. And once they get out, they lose that community. And that's where we get veteran suicide, is when that community's gone. We never build that community often in construction, you know, at that level. And when we put people in these austere environments like that, and we never build that community. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that anyone can do, is to start building that community around themselves. That, you know, go out tomorrow and start making friends, like Thomas said, you know, just build that community of people that you know, that you can be around, and that, you know, it's so important, you know, and that's really, I think, a huge difference maker. If we can start to do that, I think we can start to make a dent in some of these terrible numbers.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Thomas. Both of you definitely brought it home with actions that we can take to make a positive difference for this critical conversation. I want to thank you both. If you've been listening this far, you know, thank you so much. Give yourself some time after this is over, before you just click to the next thing you're going to listen to. Take some space, give yourself grace, go about, take some action when you can. And when you can't, don't beat yourself up for not. It's not your time yet. Thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of your day. Good commutes. Enjoy. Make some friends. Let's go build.
We love you all.
Thank you.
Very special thanks to my guest. I'm Felipe Engineer-Manriquez. The EBFC Show is created by Felipe and produced by a passion to build easier and better. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, everybody. Let's go build.